All righty, welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving online information entrepreneurs throughout the US and the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am so excited to introduce my new friend and today's guest, Dr. Richard Shuster. Welcome, Dr. Richard.
We are friends, aren't we? I love podcasting because it's what happens after you hit the stop button, right? And you build these relationships. So you just graced my audience with your presence on my show, and I'm humbled and grateful for the opportunity to do the same on yours.
Oh, well, I'm super excited. We were introduced through our mutual friend, I believe JV Crum, right? The
Yes,
third
the
introduced
third.
us. The third, you can't forget the third.
No, he gets upset if you forget the third.
I know, I know 2/3 in my life, and the other one is also in the legal. I mean, JV, he no longer practices law, but he is in the legal community. And then I went to school with a third. Anyways, I'm always so fascinated by those names that continue down the line. For folks that don't know Dr. Richard Shuster, let's get you introduced, because I just want to jump into talking, right? But I have to remember, like, oh yeah, I'm on a podcast. We should probably introduce you.
That's good.
Yep. Dr. Richard is more than just a clinical psychologist. He is a philanthropist, a sought-after TEDx speaker, and a cutting-edge CEO who harnesses the power of predictive algorithms to help people and organizations achieve their full potential. His popular podcast, The Daily Helping with Dr. Richard Shuster, delivers actionable insights from world-class experts to listeners in over 150 countries. He has been featured in media outlets such as The Huffington Post, Yahoo Finance, Inc., NPR, NBCnews.com, Men's Health, Cosmopolitan, and more. Having survived multiple near-death experiences, his newest venture helps individuals preserve their legacies for their children and future generations. Dr. Richard, what a lovely introduction. What a lovely bio. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today.
It is awesome being here.
Well, you have quite a story, and there's so many parts. I almost don't know where to begin. So for folks listening, and I know like today we are only going to be able to get to the tip of the iceberg. So if you're listening, I really hope you pop over and will join Dr. Richard on his podcast. He has a world-renowned podcast. He is a leader in his field. There's so much goodness there, and we're just going to get to the very tip top today, but I'm super excited to introduce you and have you here. Tell us a little bit about, because I'm curious about a couple parts of your journey in our time today. I'm curious about lots of parts of your journey, but in what we have time to review, one, your pathway into entrepreneurship, right? Because you come from the psychology world. And I know there's so much more there, but I would love to know where you got bitten by the entrepreneur bug.
It's
and
a
then
question. Yeah. Okay. What's the other question?
and then, of course, this whole scenario at the end of your bio of the multiple near-death experiences. You've had a couple of experiences in life that have been, really life-changing from multiple standpoints. So let's hear a little bit about your pathway into entrepreneurship, and then we'll talk about some of these really pivotal points.
Absolutely. So entrepreneurship is something that, much like yourself, I had a father who was an entrepreneur. My dad was a dentist. And so when I was very young, so he got out of dental school, he trained in the Army, and then he joined a practice. And it wasn't all his own, right? And he was the junior guy who had to build up his equity and do all this stuff. And his partners were horrible people. They were truly horrible people and made him miserable. And he eventually divorced them. And they were vindictive, and it was a vicious lawsuit. And he got everything he wanted. And then he opened up his own shop. And they actually, when patients would go to the old place looking for him, they would say he moved out of town, or made up these things so they wouldn't find him. But people found their way back to my dad. And my dad, I used to sit in the office a lot of times in summer. I would just go and hang out, right? And he would sometimes give dentistry away. And if there was a kid who the family couldn't afford to fix his mouth because his teeth were really crooked, he'd do it for free. And he once told me, and I remember this so distinctly, he said to me, I could drive a nicer car, we could have more money, but we have everything we need. We have everything we would want and everything we need, and it's really important to help people. And that kind of just made its way into my DNA and lay dormant for a while, right? But it was there. And then when I was old enough to start working, I worked shining shoes at a sports club. And what I discovered, and so I'm 16, 17, that the more I hustled, right, I could just sit in my little booth and wait for people to wander by. Or I could go up and down the halls of the locker room, say, hey, buddy, you want me to shine your shoes? And I would make a lot more money that way. So whereas my friends, and I'm showing my age here, were making $4 or $5 an hour minimum wage at the movie theaters or whatever, I would walk out with wads of cash, right? Like I was a stripper. And I had so much money for my age at 16, 17. And that always struck with me. I went to college. I got a degree in psychology, swore I would never use it. Said I just wasted my parents' money getting a degree in psychology. And I went into IT, and I did work, for somebody else. I wanted to learn the industry a little bit, but I bid on a contract. I then went off on my own, first as an independent contractor, and I bid on a contract with the DoD when I was like 23, 24 years old. I had no business in the world winning this contract, but I won it. And we weren't, creating weapon systems. This was basically to create a VPN for the medical records of the Army before there were VPNs. And so now I'm this young, obnoxious, materialistic kid who truly believes that I'm going to be able to buy an island and name it Shuster Land. And I'm going to have a plane with my face on the wing and all of these things. And so the pivotal moment in my journey, and I think this was one of the most pivotal moments in my life, was I was in a car accident in which I broke my spine and I almost died. That was near-death experience number one. And I actually talk about this pretty extensively in my TED Talk, which I'm happy to give you the link to. So
Yes.
if you guys want to kind of take a deeper dive into what that meant and how I overcame that, that'll save us a lot of time to talk about. But so that really shifted my mindset, because what came out of that was I discovered that it's not currency that really excites my soul, it's helping people, right? And that led me on this path that I am now on, in which I get to help people every day in a whole lot of different ways, which is really fulfilling and amazing. But so I tell people, like, that created Dr. Richard Shuster 2.0, right? So I wasn't a doctor yet, technically. But the bigger one, the more recent one, and there are lessons to be learned from everything, right? I feel like we have two options when something really terrible happens to us. We either can roll our fist up and point it at the sky and blame whatever deity we choose to believe in, or we can say, what are the lessons? What am I meant to learn here? How can I do things differently, right? And so, well, 2.0 version of me was merrily going along helping people, and now we're into 2021. So the journey has been moved along, or 2020, I think it was. And so I'm having a great time, right? It was peak COVID. I had my best quarter in my life. I'm not feeling the stress of COVID, because, as we talked about, all my relationships are over Zoom with podcast guests and stuff like that. And so I just did my first TEDx. In fact, I was the TEDx I spoke of, I was the first person to ever do it virtually. They had all been in person, and so I was very excited to fly to California and deliver this talk, and then pandemic, right? And thought it was never going to happen. They actually sent an email. We've decided to do these virtually. You have 2 weeks to record them and do them, right? So I had this really short window upon which I had to write and deliver TEDx, which I'm grateful that it is pretty well received and helps some people. But anyway, I was rolling, right? My businesses were doing great. And then I had a stroke and I almost died. Much like my car accident, in which I got really, I mean, it's amazing. Had it been just a little bit higher, a little bit lower, I wouldn't walk, and had it been a little higher, I would have been a quadriplegic. The stroke itself, it's remarkable that I survived it for a lot of reasons. Number one, I missed a part of my brain called the basal ganglia by less than a millimeter. I can't even show you with my fingers how small that gap was, Heather. And if you see people with Parkinson's that have the stuttering and the shaking hands, basal ganglia, that's usually where that insult is to the brain. But what was really fascinating about it is this was during the midst of COVID, and they still, like, we were still Lysoling our kids and our groceries back then, right? And my wife, who drove me to the hospital, couldn't come in with me. So I basically literally staggered into this plastic tent where there was a worker in a hazmat suit, just like Darth Vader, or the breathing, right? And she basically asked me, "Why do you need to be admitted to this hospital today?" And I said, "Well, I've had a stroke." "How do you know?" "Well, I'm a neuropsychologist, I know." And I started naming like things, right? And then they put me in a separate area and stuck the thing up my nose, PCR, whatever it is. And I had no COVID, so they let me into the actual hospital. And all the doctors and nurses were running around totally frenzied, wide-eyed, because everybody was freaked out, right? And they missed on my scan the stroke. So the doctor comes to me, he says, "Well, good news, I've looked at your scan, you're fine, I'm discharging you." And I looked at him and I remembered my first boss at my first job. He said to me, it was a sales job, this was after college, and he said, when you're in sales and you make your final offer, your best offer, the pitch, right? Shut up, because whoever talks next is the one that gives in. And he just popped into my head at that moment. And I said to him, "No, this is what's going to happen. You're going to give me an MRI, because there's certain kinds of strokes that show up on a MRI that don't show up on a CT scan. Then you're going to give me blood thinners to save my life, because I need them. And you're going to do it right now." And then I locked in on him, right? And the tension in the room was amazing, because there were probably 6 people in the room doing different things, and nobody talks to doctors that way. And it was like an Old West kind of John Wayne showdown. There should have been a tumbleweed like blowing across. And he rolled his eyes at me and he said, "All right, I'll give you your MRI." And they did it, and it found it, and I got my blood thinners, and I'm alive because of that. Because it's not the stroke usually that kills people. Strokes are like earthquakes. It's usually the aftershocks. And that's what happened to Luke Perry. It wasn't the stroke that killed him. It was the consequences, the kind of these after effects that killed him. And so it saved my life. And, in the interest of time, I'm going to save a lot of this story. But I was reasonably young at the time and had no risk factors. I worked out every day. I ate right. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I've never done drugs. I meditated every day. I had a gratitude practice. I got good sleep, like all the boxes. Because, I'm preaching this to people like I should practice what I preach, right? Except for one thing. And so when my neurologist, who didn't know what was wrong with me, sent me to every other ologist imaginable to try and figure it out, and all of their results were negative, he said, "Let me ask you a question, Richard." He's sitting there looking at me, and my wife's next to me. He said, "How many hours do you work each week?" And I said, well, no, I don't work at all. And he's like, what? He's like, do you have a rich uncle? Like, what do you mean? Like, you're 46. What do you mean you don't work? And I said, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't really work because I love what I do. And he immediately, like, I saw his face turn red and his brow furrowed, and he very annoyingly said to me, he was so irritated, I could tell, Richard, how many hours a week do you love what you do? I said, maybe 80 to 100. He said, let me tell you something. He said, the odds of you being where you are right now, because I overcame all of my stroke symptoms in 2 weeks, which they told me was impossible. They said to me in the hospital, well, you've got a really long road to recovery. And I said, I'll be fine. I'll be totally back to normal in 2 weeks. And they said, well, we're sending psych to see you. You're in shock. I said, don't send psych. I'm psych. I don't need you. And I was like, I literally meditated for like 12 hours a day, seeing my brain rewiring. Like I was literally to the day as I am now, 2 weeks post-stroke. But what he said to me was that, if I don't make radical changes to my lifestyle, this will happen again. And there was the lesson, right? Whereas the car accident taught me that what I'm meant to be doing is helping people, not just chasing dollars. The stroke taught me that I need to have balance in my life, and I don't need to be working so hard. And if you're listening to this, you're probably an entrepreneur or thinking about a entrepreneur, maybe you know. And so the thing about entrepreneurship is that it's so seductive, right? The freedom to be your own boss and go shopping at Costco at 2 p.m. on a Thursday, right? You could do anything you want. And then there's the lure of the money, right? So most of us who start businesses, we do so under the auspices of reasonably good causes, right? I want to give financial security to my family, and I want to be able to enjoy, X, or I want to make the world a better place. Or it's most of us don't start businesses because we want to hurt some group of people, right? So it's very easy to get caught up in this romanticized crusade about, why do I need to shut my laptop at 6 p.m. if I work on this proposal till 10? This is for my family. I'm doing this for my family. The night of my stroke itself, I was on a call. Like, if you had reached out to me pre-stroke on LinkedIn and said, I'm in China, can we meet at 11 o'clock at night? I would have done it if I thought it was a good opportunity. I mean, the night before, like, I got off a call at 11:30 p.m. Eastern. I was talking to somebody on the West Coast because I thought it was a good business opportunity. It almost killed me, right? And so what I have learned, and as I'm sitting there in the neurologist's office with my wife, who's crying as she's hearing this, because she's saying, head in her hands, he's never going to stop, doctor. He's an animal. And I just said, okay. And I don't know where this came from. It just popped into my head. I said, all right, 25 hours a week for the rest of my life. And she looks up and she wipes her eyes. Are you serious? I said, yeah. And I've done it. And see my dogs. Can you hear my dogs?
I can hear
Yes.
your dogs.
Yes.
There's the real life, right?
Yes, it is real life.
Sneaking into the podcast.
Yes, they're very famous. So yeah, that was for me this opportunity to really reset some things, because what I realized is that that was like close call number 2. And that one really had a lot of things that happened to turn exactly the right way, to which I'm here. Like it's a long story, but I recognized that I need to stop. And so, because I understand neuropsychology, and because you're a systems person, so you'll appreciate this, right? I created systems for myself that allowed me to not only earn as much money as I did working 100 hours a week, but more, but give me that opportunity to have this tremendous life, a leveled up life, because I had a good life. Like, I have a great relationship with my wife. We've been married almost 15 years. It's not like she was giving me ultimatums saying, if you don't spend more time with us, I'm walking out the door. Like, it was a good life. But how many times? I can't tell you how many times my kids would come to me and say, Daddy, can we play? And I would say, no, I'm working. I'm sorry.
Mm.
Right. And in my mind, I'm doing it for them. But I robbed myself of those opportunities. And so now I have very, very rigid systems in place that allow me to, for me, it was about controlling my schedule. And so
Mm.
I'll share with your audience kind of how I set up this filter about who gets on my calendar. Number one, the person has to care more about helping people than they care about profit, because profit will come if everybody's aligned and doing good things. So if they check that box, the next box is, are they the chocolate to my peanut butter, right? Like, we're good together, but are good by ourselves, but together, can we be even better, right? And then the third one, and the third one is going to be different for everybody. I know what my number is. You've got a number, I'm sure, but we don't often think about this. This is, what is the number that I'm satisfied making for both of us that will both profit in this, but it has to be a minimum of X to where it's worth my time. If they meet A and they meet B, maybe we'll hang out and watch football together on a Saturday, but there's no way in hell they're getting on my business calendar. And so what that did was it greatly refined who I did business with, who I interfaced with, because I automatically pre-vetted them, right? And, A is pretty easy to find out if you just talk to somebody. People can put up a good front, right? But you can figure pretty quickly if somebody is just, all they care about is profit. They can't help it, all right? And so it's pretty easy to figure that out. And so what that did, it took 85% of the type of appointments that I used to book off my calendar. So that automatically freed me up to do things. And the way that I approach workflow was different as well, because now I understood how to better position, what do I need to do? How do I need to do it? When do I need to do it by? One of the best pieces of advice I ever received, Heather, was that the work always gets done. If you shut your laptop on a Wednesday and open it up on a Thursday, it'll still be there. There are very few instances, and there are exceptions, and I, have an exception list, but there are few people that are going to present you an opportunity at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday to where if you don't do it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life, right? Mm-hmm. And so we as entrepreneurs, particularly early entrepreneurs, tend to perceive that every single client is, the next Bill Gates or Steve Jobs knocking on our door. It's not true. It's just not true. And what you have to understand is that your customers are people too. People with families, people with kids that have to go to baseball practice or ballet or whatever it is. And so I promise you, they're not reading your proposal at 10:30 at night. They're not. So why do it? Why not just say, okay, I'm going to go have dinner with my family? Why not say, you know what? I'm going to go take my wife on a date. We're going to go to a matinee, right? Why not do these experiences? Because you can structure everything in your business in such a way that with automation, with delegation, there's so many ways that people don't realize that are very inexpensive and easy to implement, to where you could have this drastic increase in your freedom. I understand when you're a startup. I mean, we talked about it on my podcast, how you got your law career off the ground. You hustled like crazy, but then you had more work than you knew what to do with. And so what does that mean? Well, it means you hire somebody who can do the work. Well, you have more time to watch HGTV with your husband, right? Right. And
right.
So that's your aspirational goal, right? To I read it in your bio on my show. So I think that we get so wrapped up in the minutia of what it takes to be in this business that we label things as urgent or emergent when they're really not. I'm not saying that there aren't emergencies in your business. I don't even have my work email app installed on my phone.
So
That
good.
that was a conscious decision, right? And so I work, for those of you that work have a home office, like this space where I'm sitting right now, and I'm even so ridiculous about it. Like I have a podcasting space right here, and then here I have, my other business space, because it I'm very intentional about, my mindset and what I'm doing at a particular point in time. When I shut the door on this and the lights are off, that's it. That's it. And I'm not going to get a notification over dinner about some customer or what have you, right? Because I've got things in place. Now, if Rome's on fire, people know how to get a hold of me. Like if there's truly an emergency, people can truly get a hold of me. In a calendar year, that might happen twice.
Yep.
If at all. So, if I think that, and a lot of times people hear this and they'll say, nah, I can keep working hard, and you should, right? But like, I'm telling you that your biology is not designed to have this type of strain on you as an ever-present stressor, and you can only burn the candle at both ends so many times. You're no good to your spouse or your children if you're dead.
No,
You're
no.
no good to them if you have cancer. You're no good to them if you have a stroke. You're just not. I'm lucky. I'm
Right.
really lucky. So, if any of that resonates, I hope it does. But my goodness, yeah, there's so many ways to approach business in an AI driven world that lets you have some of that freedom that we've never had before, and we just, as business owners, need to take advantage of it.
Well, I mean, obviously there's parts of your story that I don't love, like those going through those tumultuous, hard times are, like you say, you have a choice. How do you deal with that? Do you use it as a way to propel you into the next phase of growth and version 2.0 of self, or, shake your fist at the sky? And when we do the former, we have these opportunities to develop next level selves and to continue that path and hopefully avoid. I mean, you gave a terrific example of how sometimes we just have to learn the lesson by making choices that are not serving us well. But the benefit of the way that information can be shared. I mean, we're on a podcast, right? You have an amazing podcast. Like, what I'm hoping is that people feel the truth of what you have just shared, as far as how essential it is to examine our lives and look at, where are we on autopilot? Where are we just doing things and going through our day because we feel like that's how it has to be? And we have not carefully examined, can we do it better? What if we were hardcore with ourselves in the way that you became? Like that really poignant 2020, 2021 experience for you of getting that close to death and having you look at your boundaries in a new way and get really hardcore with yourself. What if we could do that before experiencing that near-death experience, right? And unfortunately, so many of us wait for the canary in the cage to be a really significant, painful thing, rather than being introspective and doing the work that it takes to examine everything so consistently, so deeply, that we make those changes ahead of time. It's a real, I mean, I'm just inviting people to sit for a moment and where do we need to create those boundaries, right? We all have opportunities to do this better. Entrepreneurship is rife with ways that we can do it wrong, right? That balance, that like really prioritizing the right things.
I think what's cool about entrepreneurship is I've never met an entrepreneur that isn't also a self improvement junkie. Like they just go hand in hand. And so, we have the benefit of learning from other people's mistakes, right? We read a book
Yes.
and we get to learn, like I've just shared something horrible that happened to me that ended up being really good because of how I chose to reframe it. But yeah, if you're listening to this and you're working too many hours, I hope I'm the cautionary tale for you so that you can rock your business and not ruin your marriage or your health, right?
Yeah.
And so
Or miss your kid's childhood or
absolutely.
whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's about finding those things, that as an entrepreneur, I love doing things wrong because I know, great, the next iteration will be better. And so it's the same thing, right? We use trial and error. I mean, we are the ultimate guinea pigs because we'll try these things on ourselves. And so I just, for me, I mean, it created a whole new platform. I mean, I didn't really intend to create a platform that helps entrepreneurs be more balanced, but that's actually what happened because I'm inspired, to just help entrepreneurs have the life that they should, right? Like what good is it? I don't recall what year this study was done, but there was a study, maybe 2010-ish, where I think maybe 100 Fortune 500 CEOs were interviewed, and they were all asked the same questions about their marriage, about their health, about their relationships with their kids. And the percentages aren't resonating, but overwhelmingly, many of them were divorced or their marriages were not good. Many of them, their kids had gone off to college and the kids resented them or had no relationship with their parent because at work at 5 a.m. and home at 10 a.m. Like it isn't worth it. You can have all of it. You really can, but you just have to be very intentional, much like you advise people with having the legal system in place. Have a system in place to bring balance and harmony to your business so that you can have it in your life.
Yeah. Well, and like get hardcore with yourself. I think so often we look at incremental change, like we think, oh, here's a way I can shave this off or do like, what if we adopted a paradigm of, you know what I mean? How can I do this dramatically better? How can I do it dramatically different and even achieve more? I know we've got only a couple minutes left. You have got an amazing story and you highlight multiple ways that these lessons show up in our lives and, give us the opportunity to make change for the better, which our listeners all want to do, right? We're all on this path of wanting to have more impact, do things better, and hopefully not be waiting for the dramatic events that force us into those opportunities. Couple of very quick questions for you. And, it's okay if you rehash some of what you've told us, but 3 questions related to this podcast. 1, what's the gutsiest thing you've ever done?
So I decided when I was young that I was going to play a prank on the world. And I created a fake endangered species and was able to get it in the Wall Street Journal. It went to the White House, like it really got out of control. And that might have been the stupidest thing I've ever done, but at the time it seemed like the right thing to do.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. That is a conversation for another day.
That's a different episode.
Oh my heavens. So many questions about that. What event or challenge, and obviously you've shared a few already, but what has required the most grit in your life?
I would say it was post-accident, because when the stroke happened to me, I had already been in the business for many years of personal development and mindset. And so like adversity, like I was made for that, right? But when the stroke happened, or the car accident happened, I was very young and lost. And so from a grit standpoint, I had no sense of purpose. I was disillusioned. I was clinically depressed. I wasn't suicidal, but I was absolutely depressed and had to have a serious look in the mirror and say, how do you start finding meaning in your life? And I actually found it accidentally, as you'll hear in the TEDx, because we don't have time to talk about it. But that path, that stepping that taking that first step onto that path, I would say, took the most grit, because
Mm,
I could have very easily just gone back and done something similar and gone and back into technology. But in fact, I, went to graduate school, which intimidated the hell out of me, with a bunch of students who were 10 years younger than me, and got a degree that, I never previously thought that I, would be able to earn. So I would
mm.
say that was my answer to that.
That's amazing. Okay, final question, and then we're going to find out where people can connect with you. What's the single most important thing that you've done to helping you build a great business?
Be genuine. I
Mm,
think that, when you are a genuine person, and who you are on camera is pretty consistent with who you are off camera, that resonates.
mm,
And, I'm very grateful for everything that I have, but I think that, you will find that while I have multiple companies and they all do very different things,
mm,
they're all on mission. And my mission is to help people be better than they were the day before, even if it's of no direct benefit to me. That's like my mission statement, right?
mm,
And so, if you don't, and you didn't ask this, but if you don't, if you're listening and you don't have a mission statement, like if you don't know why you're on this earth, you need to find out, because once you have that nailed down, everything else flows from that. And it comes from the heart, it comes from a place of genuineness. And when you're coming from a place of goodness, and people see that you're passionate about it and you really care, people, that's infectious and they want to get involved.
mm. Oh, I love that so much. Love that. Where do folks find you? Where do you show up online? Where do you like to connect with people?
So the mothership is now drrichardschuster.com. I know you're going to link to it in the show notes, but I dare you to spell it any way you want, because I bought every domain with every possible spelling, and it all links to the same place. I've actually got a really short free quiz there that people can take, just 10 questions, but really will then custom curate a list of episodes that I've had with some really amazing people that will guide them through some things that will help them in wherever they happen to be on their journey.
Oh, I love that so much. A quiz attached to your podcast episodes. That is cool. I'm going to go do that. Folks, you can find that at the show notes page. We're going to share your primary website, your TEDx talk. You can find that at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Find Dr. Richard Schuster's episode. Dr. Richard, anything else you want us to share there? Obviously, send over. Are you on social?
The funny thing is, not really.
Okay,
I'm
good answer. Good answer.
I'm on social, but I don't really use it. I guess LinkedIn I'm most active, but
Okay.
I really, that's a whole nother
Your
episode too.
boundaries are clear. I love
Yeah,
it. It's a
yep.
great answer. Perfect. So go take the quiz, connect with Dr. Richard on his podcast. I'm so excited to have participated just today. Looking forward to sharing that as well. Dr. Richard, what final thought or takeaway would you like to leave our listeners with?
On my show, I tell people to do something for somebody else as an act of kindness, but I'm going to flip the script a little bit. As entrepreneurs, we often sacrifice our own self-care and enjoyment for the belief that when I reach this magical pinnacle of X number of dollars or X clients, I can do something, I can enjoy life. Do it today. Go do something for
Mhm.
you that you enjoy. In fact, I schedule that into my calendar so that I have more fun. Like I do the things that I selfishly love to do during the week so that I can be more present with my wife and kids on the weekend and do stuff that is really important to them. So, but make time to have fun, because life is precious.
Oh, I love that so much. Dr. Richard, thank you for joining us. I'm such a fan. I'm really grateful for your time with us today.
I loved it. Thanks so much for having me.